So they basically, the government, they pushed off Lauren's lawsuit because everyone expected her to die. So they kept just pushing it off and pushing it off, because when a child dies before the compensation program goes into effect, the family gets $250,000.
And that's all. That's all.
And so that's what they wanted, because everyone knew Lauren was going to die. It was just a matter of time. So,
and if she lives, it's going to cost him more money.
Exactly. So that's where we're at. I mean, they wanted her to die. They wanted this to go away, period. So do they communicate that in every single way they can? Yes, they do. And it's just a terrible, terrible thing. I don't know, the hardest thing for me, besides the fact that my daughter was grievously injured, is talking about money and the value of her life.
I understand.
And I don't mind talking about it now. I'm just saying that I know we're lucky because Lauren got therapy, she got her van, and but there's
what about compensation for you for
the parents
don't
get compensation? No,
what?
Parents don't get anything. Parents don't get anything. It goes to the child, and then there's lawyers and court, and we went to court every 2 years.
And you have to turn in your receipts every month and all that?
I turn in my receipts every month. I had to account for every dime that was spent, and every 2 years we'd go to court, and that Lauren would pay for it. Like the first time we went to court, it cost us $14,000. Cost her $14,000 because they do a forensic accounting of just every single penny you spend. And so vaccine court there's just no winning with vaccine injury. It was a horrible experience. I talked to one mom, and I talked to one woman who happens to be a mom, but she had interviewed 85 families that went through vaccine court, and everyone had the same experience. They're monsters. They're horrific. I know Mary Holland was talking just about that this was not the spirit of the way this law was set up. But, now we have the internet, and now we can connect, and now we can share our stories, where back in the day, I didn't have anybody to go home and say, hey, what happened to you in court? And that just was not to be found. And still, right. I find that most people won't talk about court. I've met a couple people that have gone through it, but most people will not have this conversation.
How many people were in that courtroom when you were in there? Was it an ongoing?
No, it wasn't a courtroom. It was just.
How many times did you go to court?
We went for 3 days, and so it wasn't court. It was my attorney's office. You don't go into court. You just go into a room. So you just rent a room because they don't want you in court. They don't want anyone to see what's going on. They don't want it on the ballot. They don't want people. No, you go. I went into my attorney's office, and it was special master, the stenographer, the nurse on the government side, the attorneys on the government side, the life care planner on the government side, and then they had a couple of doctors. The doctors said, that this is what they do. They just say what they say. They said, well, we don't have to pay for your doctor's visits because they're all for ear infections. And I said, well, actually, Lauren's never had an ear infection because they just do what they do. They go in and they just rip you up. And so it was me, Lauren's father, and our life care planner and our attorney.
Wow. So it's like intimidation and kind of retaliation.
Yeah, and I mean, it's just like, I don't think I'd really ever been to court before. No, I had been in court because but not like personally. I used to be a collections person. So it's just a complete foreign experience. And seriously, at the time, I didn't think to myself that, they're hiding us. That was not a thought. I just didn't even think about that. I knew that my attorney told me not to trust these people, and their representatives were all against us. But until you go through it, you can't really experience it.
Did you have an inkling at this time while you're going through this court process that there were other children going through and families going through the same thing you were going through, or did you think it was just you in the whole world, you're the only one that was going through this?
I felt very, very isolated.
But did you have any kind of inkling that other families might be going through this?
Honestly, I can't. I was so broken. I was on survival mode. My husband was drinking quite heavily. My kid was seizing out of control. So I wasn't exactly thinking, maybe I was. I remember, I remembered back in 95, I stopped watching the news. I remember that things were not honest. I remember that I felt very, what's the word? I felt very alone. I felt very afraid. I knew that the truth about vaccines were being covered up. So I just knew that the news, because at this time I'd written everybody. I'd written Phil Donahue, I'd written Oprah, I'd written Now. I mean, back, 22 years ago, think about what was on TV. I wrote to every single news media. I wrote to magazines. I wrote to Parrot Magazine, and I wrote and wrote and wrote and called and called and called, and I sent pictures, and I did all of this, and nobody replied to me.
Nobody, not one single person.
If they replied to me, it was a denial of my story. There was no story there. So it was very clear to me that everybody just wanted us to go away. Nobody was going to talk about it, the way the doctors were talking. So I had reached out to every news outlet that I could think of, and nobody wanted to hear my story. And so I realized that back then, and maybe I'm cynical and jaded now, but I realized back then that, there is no truth on the news. So a lot of times the things I see, they haunt me and they make me feel sad, but I'm not shocked because this has been going on in my life for 22 years. I know that my daughter's health, her life did not matter. And it was about, I didn't realize the magnitude of the money then, but I knew that she was just, everyone wanted her to go away. I mean, her pediatrician came over my house the day after she died. He had worked with her for 15 years, and he said, she should have died when she was 1. So everyone expected Lauren to die, and that's what everyone was banking on. And
it was probably because of the care and love that you
we loved her, and she was amazing. And I mean, it is care is important, but I think that it was her sole agreement. I can't say that I loved her any less or more than any other parent loves their child, but I think when it was her time, and there was nothing I could do about it. And she was ready to go. Lauren, there's a very deep spiritual aspect of her. She told me a year before she died that she was ready to die. And it was just her time. I mean, love, faith, and healing, it's very complex, and I certainly don't get it all. But I think Lauren came here to do something, and she did it, and it was time for her to go when it was time. So,
how old was Lauren when she died?
She died 4 months before her 16th birthday.
Wow. So did Lauren have friends? And
she had friends. She was lovely. Lauren is amazing. There's something about children who are unique, and Lauren exuded love. She was very, very powerful because when you walked into the room, let's say you walk into her bedroom, you just can feel the thickness of the air. It was just love. She was never afraid. She was totally courageous. She loved life. She loved being a girl. She had friends. She had sleepovers. She had best friends. She swam with the dolphins. She was in a school musical. She was the vice president of her Girl Scout troop. She went to school up until she became too sick to go to school, and she just had this huge life. So there's a thing about, our unique kids that they're just beautiful, and the essence of them is powerful, and the lessons that they're here to teach us are not to be discounted. And so you were either afraid of her because she was so loving, and that could be fearful for people, but strangely enough, she made people feel safe just by being with her. And she never walked and never talked, but she communicated in many different ways. She talked to people in dreams and still does, and she's just a powerful little girl that went through this really amazingly tragic story of vaccine injury and was severely affected, but her spirit was always there. I mean, she'd smile and just light up the room. Just something that I'm very honored to be able to witness, and it was very difficult. So I wrote the book because it was it was just a really difficult time, but there was so much love. I mean, the highs were high and the lows were low, but, I just want to remind parents to tell their story, but to also, love their child and know that every day is important for all of us. Because, I mean, these are kind of crazy times right now.
Yeah. Now, have you